Hey guys, Zach here, and today I want to talk to you guys about filters. Now, more specifically, I want to give you guys the instances when I will use a filter and when I won't use a filter, so that you can decide for yourselves if you want to try out a filterless tank. First, I think it's important to understand the three types of filtration that generally happen in an aquarium filter. The first type of filtration that a filter does is mechanical filtration, and that is just the physical removal of a lot of waste and organics that float around in the water. So you can think about leftover fish food, even fish waste, any chunks of wood that might float around. If your filter can catch it, it's going to remove it. And in the filter media, there's generally like foam pads, and those are what is going to catch all of that debris and make sure that it doesn't go back into the system. So that is mechanical filtration. Biological filtration is the second type of filtration, and it is achieved by using bacteria to break down some compounds in your water. Now, the bacteria will colonize inside of a filter on filter media that has a lot of surface area, something like the little ceramic balls, even small plastic balls or ceramic rings inside of your filter. That's where the bacteria will colonize. And this biological breakdown is what is considered as biological filtration. Now, the bacteria will break down ammonia and nitrites and nitrates. The third type of filtration is chemical filtration, and it's exactly as it sounds. It's just chemically filtering the water. And a lot of the time, filters won't have this in them right away. It'll mainly consist of biological and mechanical filtration, which is going to be good on a lot of tanks. 99% of the time, that's going to be perfectly fine. However, if you do feel a need to bump up your filtration a little and use some chemical filtration, the most common way to achieve this is just using activated carbon. Now that we understand really the three parts to a filter, I can explain to you guys the times when I will use a filter and the times that I won't use a filter. There are really three reasons why I will use a filter on a tank. The first instance I will use a filter in is if I'm setting up a tank and I'm cycling it. I have found that that extra biological and mechanical filtration that the filter does provide really helps me, and it just makes my life a little bit easier in cycling the tank, and it makes cycling happen a lot smoother. So that's when I will use a filter, when I am setting up a tank and I need to cycle it. Now, the second reason I would use a filter is if I need a little bit of flow in my aquarium. So if I'm keeping a fish that is in like a stream or a river that has a little bit of flow, a little bit of current, then I'll use a filter to kind of simulate that. And I have found that the fish first get a lot more comfortable, a lot faster in the aquarium when they have access to that flow. And the second is that if I create that flow towards the front of the tank, I find that they will dart in and out of it, and it'll draw them to the front of the tank where I can interact and observe the fish, and overall the aquarium is just a lot more enjoyable. Now, if you need higher flow, then this can also be achieved with a bulkhead. The third reason I would use a filter is for surface agitation. Now, if I have a planted tank and the plants aren't looking too great, I will sometimes throw in a filter and make sure there is a lot of surface agitation happening in the tank. What this does is it increases the gas exchange between the oxygen and CO2 in the water and the atmosphere, which can give your plants a little bit of a boost. Now, it's not going to be the same as if you were pumping CO2 into your aquarium. However, this little bit of a boost can sometimes help the plants in the aquarium. Now, moving on to the times when I won't use a filter, there's really only one time that I won't use a filter in a tank, and that is when I have a very heavily planted tank. There are a couple of reasons why I will not use a filter in my heavily planted tanks. The first and main reason why I don't use a filter in heavily planted tanks is that I've found that it's just not needed. What ends up happening is a lot of the filtration actually takes place inside of the tank, meaning that any filter that I do put on actually becomes useless and not needed when in a heavily planted tank. Now, what I mean by the filtration starts to take place in the tank is that there is mechanical and biological filtration that can happen and occurs very naturally inside of heavily planted tanks. The biological filtration gets taken care of by bacteria, and those bacteria don't only colonize inside of filters, they actually colonize inside your tank as well. They'll colonize on the glass, on the substrate, on the hardscape, even on the plant's leaves. They'll colonize all over the tank. So if you have a lot of plants, you've got a lot of surface area inside of your tank for that bacteria to colonize, and I've found that that will take care of a lot of the biological needs inside of the tank, and that filtration is taken care of. Now, as for mechanical filtration, as the waste components start to break down into detritus and mold at the bottom of the tank, as long as your substrate is healthy and it can take it, then it'll start to break down and integrate into the substrate itself, where the plants will then take care of it, and all you really have to do is trim the plants. Now keep in mind, your substrate might get a little ugly, you can get a little bit of debris on it, but if you're okay with that, then the mechanical filtration can take place inside of your tank as well. Now there are two important factors I would say to consider if you are going to go with a heavily planted tank that might set you back a little bit, but they're very important to make sure that you do have a successful tank if you are not going to be using a filter. The first is that your substrate layer does need to be thick enough that you can get anaerobic bacteria in those deeper layers. All of the bacteria that's colonizing on the glass, on the hardscape, wherever, that's all aerobic bacteria, and it will thrive in the presence of oxygen. However, there is anaerobic bacteria that actually grows in the substrate, but it has to lack oxygen, which means you do need a substrate that is thick enough, which is going to be probably at least 3 inches, so that you can grow that anaerobic bacteria, and that will help with your filtration. The second factor to consider is that you are not stocking your tank too quickly. What this creates is a excess amount of bioload in the tank, which it just cannot take care of, and the filtration inside of your tank can't keep up, which can lead to a buildup of ammonia, which can cause harm to your inhabitants and even kill off a lot of them. What you have to do instead is slowly build up the amount of fish or shrimp or anything else in your tank over time, and that will allow the tank to grow and basically adjust to the bioload that is inside the tank. So if you start with a couple of shrimp, and then maybe you get a couple of fish, and then a couple more fish over a couple of weeks, the bacteria colonies and the plants in your tank can grow, and they'll be able to take care of that increased bioload. So if you want to just have everything all in your tank at once, then I would definitely not recommend going filterless, and I would recommend a filter so that you can keep up with that bioload. That really is everything for this video. What I will say to you guys though is that this video isn't all encompassing, and I would definitely say you need to do a little bit more research if you do decide you want to try and go filterless, but it is completely up to you. If you guys have enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.